Hello, bookish enthusiasts, and get ready to be transported to different worlds, one page at a time. Today, we unlock the doors to Dune by Frank Herbert. If my content resonates with you and you want to see more, make sure to like this video and hit that subscribe follow button. And if you're feeling extra generous, leave a comment to let me know how my videos have impacted you. Your feedback fuels my creativity. Book 1, PGs, 146. Dune is the story of an off-world noble family. Their world is violently shattered, but their young scion adapts to the ways of his new planet, assumes religious and military leadership, optimizes his powers of prescience to see the plot against him, and utterly defeats his foes. As House Atreides prepares to leave the planet Caladan, which they have governed for 26 generations, an ancient, bird-eyed crone pays a visit to examine the boy, Paul, and determine if he may be the Kiwad's Hadera. Paul's mother, Lady Jessica, treats the Reverend Mother Gaius Helen Mohiam obsequiously. Paul, who pretends to be asleep, wonders about Mohiam's words and his mother's past in the Ben Gesserit sisterhood before becoming the Duke's concubine. He wonders about the desert planet, Dune or Arrakis, where they are moving. Their mortal enemies, the Harkonnens, have been turned out after governing for 80 years. The social caste system is said to be weaker there, and the Sand people, called Fremen, are a mystery. Paul performs his mother's mind, body exercises to relieve tensions. At dawn, Jessica prepares him to meet her former teacher, currently the Emperor's truthsayer. Paul senses his mother's fear. Mohiam is weary from her travels as mother and son approach. She mentally curses Jessica for disobeying orders, dismisses her, and uses the voice to draw Paul beside her. Revealing a metal cube, she orders Paul to insert his hand and holds a metal object near his neck, a gob jabber that kills instantly if he moves. Paul recites to himself the litany against fear. His arm throbs and builds to the pain of burning flesh before Mohiam declares no woman-child has endured this much. Paul withdraws his hand and sees no damage. Mohiam senses that Paul could be the one, summons a relieved Jessica, and explains how humans once permitted machines to enslave them. This precipitates the Butlerian Jihad, the Bene Gesserit's need to sift people to find the humans. The Spacing Guild trains mathematical geniuses called mentats. Paul reveals knowledge of a special truthsayer drug to help better detect falsehood, which Mohiam warns is dangerous as it opens avenues of the past. There is one place too terrifying for any woman to examine, which the male Kwisatz Haderach alone will explore. Many have tried and died. A sullen teen, Fade, Rautha, and a slender, effeminate mentat, Peter de Vries. Study a globe of Arrakis as Baron Vladimir Harkonnen brags about the trap he has set for his cousin, Duke Leto. Leto refuses to meet and rightly suspects treachery. De Vries warns that the Emperor is watching and could send his fearsome Sardaukar Corps to destroy the Baron's home planet. But the Baron orders his mentat, whom he thinks is too emotional and addicted to spice, to detail the plot for his nephew's benefit. House Atreides settles in Arrakeen, recently vacated by Count and Lady Fenring. There, a diversionary attempt on Paul's life forces an investigation which clears the Harkonnens' true agent, Dr. and implicates Lady Jessica. As Leto believes things are secure, Imperial Sardaukar disguised in Harkonnen uniforms attack and House Harkonnen is restored to the greatest wealth in the universe, including an irrevocable directorship in Chon. Leto's downfall must be a lesson to other great houses, and he must see it coming, Harkonnen is so grossly and immensely fat that he requires portable suspensors to move about. Mohiam and Jessica speak privately on the evening of Paul's ordeal, like the one Jessica endures at puberty on Wallach Ix. Her hand still recalls the pain. Mohiam demands why Jessica has disobeyed orders and borne a son rather than the daughter who could have sealed the dynastic rift with the Harkonnens. Both bloodlines could now be lost. Mohiam reminds Jessica of how the imperial household, the Landsraad, and the guild control human society and warns that Jessica cannot shield her son from the forces arrayed. Arrakis may prevent Paul from fulfilling any destiny, despite preparatory work by the Missionaria Protectiva. There is little hope that Paul will be the Bene Gesserit totality. Jessica summons Paul to be questioned about his dreams. He tells of one last night. He talks with a skinny, blue-eyed girl in a cavern about meeting Mohiam and receiving a stamp of strangeness. He has dreamed of her before. She calls him Usul, and they share a Gurney-Halleck tone poem. Paul has no interest in the Kwisatz Haderach and is angry when Mohiam predicts his father's death. Mohiam advises Jessica to concentrate Paul's training on the voice. Unnerving tears flowing down Mohiam's wrinkled cheeks as she departs. A week later, Thufir Hawat, who is leaving a day ahead of the others, feels old and tired entering the largely empty training room where he has trained 3 generations of House Atreides. Hawat resents the witch training that Jessica is giving his current pupil. Paul senses Hawat's presence before the teacher can castigate him for sitting with his back to the door. Paul is studying the ferocious sands, storms that lash Arrakis, and cannot be controlled because the guild wants more than House Atreides can afford. Hawat tells Paul that the Fremen stink because of the still suits they wear to reclaim body moisture, and hopes the boy realizes that this planet is an enemy. Mohiam had told about Arrakis funeral plains, wastelands, and sandworms, and told him to remember 4 things that support a world: the learning of the wise, the justice of the great, the prayers of the righteous, and the valor of the brave. Hawat believes whatever fright Mohiam has thrown the boy is departing, but he still cannot discuss the ordeal. Hawat assures Paul that many more Fremen exist than the Imperium suspects, and they hate the Harkonnens. The door bangs open, and Gurney-Halleck enters, an ugly lump of a man, but Paul's favorite among his father's men. Halleck carries many weapons and a 9-string ballistat. An Ingvine scar runs along his jawbone. Halleck trains him today instead of Duncan Idaho, who is leading the second wave to Arrakis, but he would rather play and sing. Paul buckles on a shield belt and challenges him with a rapier. Paul recites the particularities of fighting within a shield: move fast on defense, slow on attack. Halleck chagrins him with a counter-movie and reprimands him when he says he is not in the mood today. Fighting is a necessity, not a mood. Halleck aims to make the boy sorry by launching a ferocious attack, which ends with each holding a blade against the other in a lethal position. Paul recalls that Halleck's scar comes from his days in a Harkonnen slave pit, as Halleck tells him a training scar or 2 will not hurt him if it prepares him to defeat Harkonnens. He worries how quickly Paul must come of age. They turn next to the training dummy that Halleck controls. He daydreams about his long-dead sister, killed by Harkonnens, but sees and is impressed by Paul's moves in the style of Duncan Idaho. After the workout, Paul relaxes on a massage table, but hears Dr. Ye's approach. Ye is a stick figure dressed in black, with purple lips, a drooping mustache, and the diamond tattoo of imperial conditioning on his forehead. He wears his long black hair in a silver souk school ring. Yoe presents Paul, a filmbook viewer, and steels himself against sadness at what must happen to free his wife Juana from the Harkonnens. Yeah, explains how melange saturation causes the Fremen's blue eyes, and Paul enthuses about sandworms said to reach 400 meters in length. Before leaving, gives Paul a miniature orange Catholic Bible on filament paper, suggests reading the marked 467th Kalima, but Paul instead finds his wife's favorite passage, which throws him. Cautions Paul not to show the antique Bible to his mother. The Duke Leto arrives next, a strong presence, tall, olive-skinned, in a black uniform adorned with the Atreides hawk crest. Paul recalls Mohiam's prediction of his father's demise, and they talk about the dangers and opportunities on Arrakis. Having stockpiled spice for over 20 years, the Harkonnens can sabotage production and blame the Atreides, causing economic harm to other houses and perhaps united action in defiance of the Great Convention. Leto is prepared for a feint within a feint within a feint. The Emperor is the most dangerous foe and can deny responsibility until his Sardaukar attack in Harkonnen uniforms. Hopefully by then, the Fremen will be an efficient fighting force, prepared under conditions as hellish as those on Salusa Secundus, where the Sardaukar train. Idaho is heading an embassy to the Fremen, at whom the Harkonnens sneer. Father and son talk of Gurney's training methods and the massive guild highliner that will carry them to Arrakis. They will not see the secretive, mutated guildsman who navigates the route. Leto reveals that his mother and Hawat suspects that Paul has Mentat capabilities and asks if he wants them train him more deeply, as a Mentat Duke would be most formidable. Paul wants to proceed, believing this may be part of his terrible purpose. Book 1, page 47, 100. Jessica stands surrounded by belongings in the great hall of their new home. The architecture bespeaks monstrous cost and waste, but pales before Carthage, the Harkonnens' megapolis. Two artifacts have special significance. A painting of the Duke's late father dressed as a matador and the mounted head of the black bull that kills him. Leto insists they be hung in the dining room. Jessica finds Leto more savage and driving since being ordered to Arrakis. Hawat has cleared the household employees. Hatred of the Harkonnens is widespread. The Fremen want to observe a while before allying, but have agreed not to raid villages. They are strong, vital, and committed people. Fighting fatigue, Leto returns to the landing field to deal with Harkonnen intrigues. The Imperial planetologist and judge of the change is honoring requests by veteran spice workers to leave the planet. Leto expects to work late and will summon Paul to a strategy conference. Cursing the old Duke's portrait, Jessica meets the head housekeeper, the shadow, Dipper, Mapes, who explains the strange call of a water cellar and observes that the house is so water-rich she does not wear a still suit. Jessica tells her that the Bene Gesserit specializes in ancient languages and finds words that put Mapes on her guard. Jessica points out a weapon in Mapes' bodice and recognizes the Freeman Krisk knife and calls it a deathmaker, as in the ancient tongue. Jessica plays up her knowledge of the mysteries which are instilled by the Sisterhood centuries ago. Mapes hands Jessica this glittering white tooth of Shai, Hulud, which Jessica delicately bloods as tradition requires. Anyone who sees a Krisk knife must be cleansed or slain. Jessica realizes the Fremen are expecting a Reverend Mother to free them and realizes she is not one. The task for which the Sisterhood has laid foundations cannot be hurried. Jessica worries that the house is not as secure as Hawat believes and has a strong need to see Paul. Mapes realizes that Jessica is the one and adds, "Poor thing." Jessica finds Dr. Yue at the windows as she enters a yellow room. He indicates Paul is asleep in the next room. He feels awkward talking to Jessica informally and is thankful she is not a master of truth-say like his wife. Like Jessica, Ye has been observing the Fremen, particularly their reaction to the lavish waste of water in this household. Jessica asks Ye about the planet's many mysteries, including the worms and the way new wells quickly go dry. Something plugs them, saying that the Harkonnens suppress much information about Arrakis. Ye speaks with a vehemence that Jessica picks up, but assumes it is because they are behind his wife's murder. They talk of ecology, guards, and shields, and Jessica smells death. She complains of being just the Duke's secretary and worries about coming bloodshed. The Harkonnens cannot allow the Duke to prosper or to live. Ye contemplates how an ancient feud has condemned his beloved wife and is going to be fought out on the planet where melange, the prolonger of life, the giver of health, is produced. They talk about spice, its immense cost, its taste, never the same twice, its euphoria, and its inability to be synthesized. Jessica wishes the house could just go renegade. She reveals that the Duke cannot marry her as a political matter. He must remain available for alliance to some great house. She loves his warm, tender side, but not his callous, harsh, cruel reverse, the legacy of his father. As Jessica leaves, suspecting that Ye has been holding something back, he wishes there were some other way for things to work out. Merely feigning sleep, Paul is ready to explore when he hears Jessica depart. Hearing a strange sound, however, he freezes and sees a 5-com, hunter, seeker in flight, ready to burrow into any moving flesh and attack vital organs. Paul knows he must disable it. As a door creaks, the hunter, seeker shoots toward the noise. Paul grabs it, hangs on tight, and smashes it. He looks up into Mapes' blue eyes. She is summoning him to his father's side and knows she has nearly died. Paul sends her to tell Hawat's men to begin searching for the operator who must be nearby. Jessica finds a staircase spiraling to an odd oval door. The palm lock easily unlocks, but before she can step inside, Mapes tells her the Duke is summoning Paul. She tells Mapes where to find him. Opening the door, Jessica realizes it enters an airlock, and the inner door bears a faint, enigmatic inscription. Inside, she sees a mass of greenery beneath the yellow light of filtered glass. She wonders who could have added this pleasure room to the building. Lady Margot Fenring leaves her a kind greeting, which is Ben Gesserit code that leads her to a message encoded underneath a leaf. It warns of danger to her son and the Duke. Panicking, Jessica is ready to race to Paul, but he enters the airlock. Hawat's Corps reports capturing, interrogating, and unintentionally killing the hunter. Seeker's controller, Paul suggests that Hawat may be getting too old and relays Mapes' warning of a traitor. Jessica shows him the warning on the leaf. They agree to keep everything under wraps. As Jessica studies the landscape, she sees a light too bright to be a star and realizes people are signaling from the distant shield wall cliffs. Harkonnen agents must be avoiding the communication network. When an all-clear comes from Hawat's men, Paul is taken to his father. Gladel is filled with rage at the attempt on Paul's life and longs to be back on Caladan. He masks his feelings about Arrakis for Paul's sake. He wonders if the Harkonnens have infected the Freemen. As a shuttle arrives, Leto meets the workers led by Halleck, ballistin in hand. Leto fills him in, pulls 300 men to report to Hawat, and sends Halleck to play some tunes and offer 20 financial incentives to convince 800 veteran workers not to leave the planet tonight. Vadel crosses the floor, showing a commander's proper confidence. But once inside, the elevator is crushed again by the thought someone has tried to kill his son. In the conference room, Leto knows he is not handling his anger well enough as he talks alone with Paul, who defends Hawat, who could not have seen the ingenious threat. Leto appreciates a new maturity in Paul and knows Hawat will punish himself more than they could. When Hawat strides in, looking older, he immediately resigns. But Leto calls that foolish. The incident is past. The remaining staff members, aides, and specialists are admitted, and Hawat is asked to report first on the Freemen. They look like good allies if they believe they can trust the men of Caladan. Their reports on the Harkonnens have proven accurate and useful in dealing with the judge of the change. Idaho finds them admirable. He estimates the cave complex he visits holds 10,000. They owe allegiance to someone called Liet, perhaps a local deity or a smuggler, whose activities are on the increase. Vadel asks Hawat to head an embassy to the smugglers, offering to overlook their activities in exchange for the ducal tithe. He will bank the tithe and pay proper taxes to the emperor. With the Harkonnen skimming 10 billion Solaris per 330 standard days, it is clear they are not going to obey the emperor's orders and clear out peacefully. Hawat reports a full complement of equipment, sandcrawlers, harvesters, spice factories, etc., per the Imperial inventory, but much of it is inoperable, and carryalls are far too few. They will be lucky to have 25 working properly in 6 months. The Guild is keeping weather satellites just out of financial reach. The Duke rejects the idea of injustice, declaring House Atreides here to live or die. Pollock is angry that the great houses speak of Leto the Just, but do not come to his aid. Leto understands that they have grown rich by avoiding risk and do not know who will win. Tri-D projections show the equipment under discussion, and Hawat discusses the limitations. Harvesters are massive, bug-like machines that move on tracks. Still, there are sandworms big enough to swallow them whole. Shields cannot be used because they attract the worms, as the Harkonnens have learned the hard way. Hawat next shows a projection of a winged carryall, oversized ornithopters, used to bring factories safely into and out of spice. Rich fields ahead of the worms that inevitably appear. Harkonnen morality is getting in and out with as much profit as possible. Hawat calls on Mentat powers to calculate profits. The Harkonnens have operated at 18. The Canadians will be lucky to make 6, 7 at first after costs. Leto wants to reproduce Caladan methods of supremacy, keeping the people happy. They can accept several seasons of reduced output as they seek to recruit freemen to meet the anticipated Sardaukar threat. Hawat anticipates 4-5 battalions of Sardaukar troops, no more because of the cost of transport. And it looks like an equal number of freemen will be trained in time. A few captured Sardaukar can be used for propaganda. Paul worries that so much depends on one age-old man, Hawat. Leto asks about the remaining Harkonnen machine. Some 250 key people have been eliminated, but 3 cells, perhaps 100 individuals, remain, and they must be eliminated in a war of assassins. Leto wants forged certificates of allegiance created for each of them to present to the judge of the change, to then be used to confiscate their property on the basis of perjury. Their families are to be stripped of all possessions, with the crown receiving the requisite percentage. Paul dissents silently from the others, worrying that this will make their enemies fight harder, knowing they have nothing to gain by surrendering. Hollick has convinced 286 to remain in service to them, but they are all in useful categories. Idaho approaches to report trying vainly to save Turok, a Fremen courier who is put upon by a band of Harkonnens. A tall, robed figure at the door warns Idaho not to unsheath the weapon he has recovered. It is Stilgar, chief of the Sietch Idaho has visited. Leto welcomes him and accepts this custom. The men protest when Stilgar bends over and spits on the polished table, but Idaho interprets it as a gift of his body's moisture. Leto accepts this too as a token of respect. Stilgar wants Idaho to enlist with him and is willing to accept dual allegiance. The two leaders accept, and Stilgar gives Idaho time to say his goodbyes. Leto is encouraged if Stilgar is any measure of the Fremen character. Idaho reports 1,000,000 Solaris reward for anyone turning in a crysknife. These weapons, ground from a sandworm's tooth, provide free passage to any Sietch for any blue land. The Duke sees De Vries behind this and cautions Idaho to guard his new blade carefully. He and Halleck will communicate by secret battle code. Halleck concludes his report by saying that the Fremen talk of 200 advanced bases being established during the Desert Botanical Testing Station period, but then sealed and abandoned. Leto wants their large cache of equipment and orders Hawat gently to bring in the planetologist kinds for questioning. The meeting ends in confusion, which leaves Paul discouraged. His father is desperate, and the old Mentat hesitant and troubled. Leto brushes aside Mohiam's warning, saying precautions have been taken, and strides off to find Hawat. Leto wonders if Hawat's nervousness betrays suspicion that he is no longer trusted. Paul's stories increase Hawat's agitation until he finally, painfully, confides finding a partial note addressed to a top Harkonnen agent named Pardee. It appears to implicate Jessica as the traitor. Leto denies the possibility, but accepts Hawat's suggestion to use Idaho to keep Jessica under constant surveillance. Leto takes for later perusal a film clip that shows how Freeman prophecy may point to Paul as the leader destined to set them free. In the conference room, Paul is sleeping on the table. Leto shivers, watching the moon dip beneath the distant shield wall cliffs as anger against the Harkonnens again swells. Arrakis' strange beauty touches him as he contemplates it as a home for his son. Watching dew-gatherers at work reminds him it is also a hideous place. Book 1, PGs, 143. At breakfast, Leto tells Paul that he is doing a hateful thing that he must. Paul watches the clip on Fremen religious practices, which contains disturbing references to himself as the Mahdi and Lisan al-Gaib. He remembers Mohiam's talk about the Kwisatz Haderach and old feelings of terrible purpose. Paul sticks up for his mother in the face of the note, but Leto assures him the suspicion is a sham. They cannot tell Jessica, lest she not act sufficiently hurt, leaving the real traitor still hidden. If anything happens to Leto, Paul is to tell Jessica the truth that his father never doubted her for an instant. Leto confesses depression over the degeneration of House Atreides, shown in his inability to marry Jessica. He hates the burden of leading with bravura and wonders aloud if it would not have been better to go renegade and sink into anonymity. Paul asks his father to rest. Before he does, he tells Paul about the spice, which gives immunity to common poisons. It forces them to be moral and ethical. Paul's inheritance is to scrabble for desert power, like a guerrilla house running, hunted. Holding Arrakis may cost him his self-respect and make the family green and black flags stand for evil things. Leto's fatalism makes Paul feel empty. The religious angle may prove valuable to Paul as a last resort, Leto believes. Kynx is shaken by his first encounter with the people he had ordered to betray. The boy fits the Messiah prophecy. Arriving at the Arakian landing field with a Fremen guard, Kynx is met by a well-armed Atreides force surrounding a tall, hawk-faced man in a jubba cloak and an ill-fitting still suit. Beside him, the boy looks small for 15 but seems assured, and wears the same clothing with casual ease. Kynes resents Halleck, who has kept him up half the night with questions about the Imperial bases and explained, offensively, how to behave in the ducal presence. Leto greets the planetologist beside the ornithopters that will fly them on their inspection of the spice fields. He introduces to Paul the judge of the change. Paul is impressed by Kynes' natural air of command. Paul's words inspire the Fremen's cries of adulation, which Kynes silences and explains they are a well-meaning, superstitious lot. The Duke insists on piloting his own thopter, with Kynes beside him to give directions. Paul and Halleck sit behind. First, however, Kynes adjusts the Duke's still suit, explaining its operation. Turning to Paul, he sees the boy has instinctively made a perfect fit himself and recalls the words, "He shall know your ways as though born to them." They take to the air in the luxurious aircraft, climbing swiftly and banking out over the shield wall. When Leto expresses appreciation for the quality of the still suits, Kynes warms and promises to show them a Fremen factory. City. Made suits are inferior copies. The shield wall looks like tortured ground dropped from space. Beyond it lie the sands. Leto asks if Kynes' report to the Emperor will state they have observed the rules. Paul believes his father is pushing Kynes too hard, focusing on spice in connection with his duties as planetologist. Leto makes clear his methods are not those of the Harkonnens, and Kynes is free to study the spice provided he shares the information. Kynes remains suspicious of this outsider despite his efforts to put him at ease. Kynes declares the base's imperial property, but grows wistful about the Eton Arrakis could be if its rulers would look up from grubbing for spice. There are already some water-stealing plants below, and in some areas, the desert teems with life. Humans learn not to waste moisture or perish. Leto banks the thopter toward a billow of tan dust. Kynes feels it is likely they will see actual spice mining. Paul sits back, having registered Kynes' voice, face, and gestures in his mother's way. Halleck pulls out his baliste and sings for Paul. When Leto spots a flying object and radios his escort to point it out, Kynes compliments him on his sharp vision, but tells him it is just a bird. Paul realizes his father is keyed up on full alert. The land is flat but wrinkled 2,000 meters below. Men walk out of the second zone, surviving by crossing on rock where worms do not go, but never from the deep desert. They will probably see a worm today, for wherever there is spice, there are worms. Worms are territorial and defend their own sands. Kynes has written a monograph on chemical analyses of specimens he has examined. Shields are no defense because they enrage worms, which rush to attack them, ignoring territorial lines. High voltage applied to each ring segment is the only known way to kill and preserve a worm. Only atomics could destroy these touch creatures. They spot a factory crawler venting sand as it mines spice. 4 spotters watch for approaching worm sign. There should be a carry-all wing hovering overhead, but it is missing. Big worms control 300, 400 square kilometers of desert. Kynes begins explaining to Paul as Leto kicks on his jet brakes and banks, having seen worm sign 3 Chem away. Kynes confirms it is a big one and radios a warning. He explains there is a bonus for whoever gives the first warning and credits the new Duke. Leto orders the bonus shared among the workers. This will set him apart from the Harkonnens. Kynes explains how the carry-all will remove the crawler at the last moment, but Leto grows worried when it fails to arrive and orders his spotters to join in rescuing the 26-man crew. The men do not want to abandon a full load of spice, but Leto is adamant that lives are more important. As they land, the smell of cinnamon is strong. They jettison equipment to make room. Men tumble out of the factory and race across the sand. They hear but cannot see the approaching worm. Leto condemns this sloppy operation, but takes off coolly after the last escort departs. Crushed into the corner by the acceleration, Paul watches the worm rise from directly below the enormous crawler in a whirlpool and swallow it whole, in a whirlpool and swallow it whole. Leto vows that someone will pay for this loss. Kynes utters a blessing on the Maker and his water. One of the rescued men whispers, Lyet, another curses the planet, and a third thanks the Duke. Paul again senses half. Truths as they talk about two Fremen seen walking away. Against his will, Kynes likes this Duke who puts human life above all else. Leto supervises setting a festive dining table. Poison snoopers are deployed but well concealed. Signs of Harkonnen excess are everywhere. There's a flagon of water at each place setting, and basins of water and towels for the guests to wash unceremoniously and slop conspicuously onto the floor to be squeezed out by beggars after dinner. Leto orders an end to the degrading practice. In the Great Hall, Jessica mixes with guests, mostly businessmen and decorative women. She stands out by her beauty and colorful attire. Idaho, in dress uniform, watches her from nearby with face unreadable. Paul is surrounded by fawning young women and shows noble reserve. Inside, the gathering repulses him. Linger Butte, a water carrier, boldly has his say. Jessica talks about keeping her conservatory, holding it in trust for the people of Arrakis, who someday will have enough water to enjoy such plants anywhere. Leto advises the water shipper to diversify his business and makes a note to infiltrate Buette's operation. Kynes, in Imperial Civil Service uniform, appears to be in a religious trance, staring at Jessica, and sets her back by asking, "Do you bring the shortening of the way?" Kwisatz Haderach in the ancient tongue. Through Halleck, Jessica has arranged for Esmar Twek, an influential smuggler, to attend. She wants access to a fast escape ship from Arrakis if needed. Leto and Jessica occupy the in places, and he, showing anger, gives a toast, beginning, "Here I am, and here I am, and here I remain." As people look questioningly about, Leto has Halleck play and waiters serve. He remains standing for another toast, to all those who have died, bringing them to this station. He drinks, slams down the flagon, then empties the remainder on the floor. The guests follow suit. Paul studies their reactions. Jessica catches Kynes pouring his into a secret flask and silently toasting her. Halleck resumes playing to lift the mood. Leto commences eating, as Jessica wonders why he seems so desperate. Diners pay compliments and chat. The loss of the crawler is a popular topic. Kynes eschews politics. Jessica realizes from his accent that the Guild Bank representative is a Harkonnen agent and worries about the Guild taking sides against the Atreides. Conversation grows tense when the banker brings up the planet's blood, drinking birds. Paul turns it to cannibalism, and Kynes supports him ecologically. The banker insults the Fremen, requiring a correction from Kynes. They recover the 70s of the body, that is water. Jessica notes some sort of accord between Tweak and Kynes, while Leto perceives a warming of Kynes' attitude towards his house. With the second course, brittle conversation resumes, but the banker is sullen. Jessica knows Kynes could have killed him and wonders if he is a casual killer through contact with the Freeman. Kynes talks on about water and the law of the minimum, which determines what kinds of life are possible on Arrakis. Butte declares enough water to support normal human life impossible here, but Kynes gives the scientific facts. If just threes of the green plants get involved in forming carbon compounds, the cycle begins. Kynes then equivocates. Water overshadows other problems. Pilot projects exist. There may be enough water. Jessica and Paul realize that he does not want people to know this. Butte lumps him with Freeman dreamers of prophecies and messiahs. Jessica makes not of who laughs and vows to herself to develop new information sources. Leto seems let down. A uniformed trooper whispers in Leto's ear and is accompanied from the dining room. Paul takes Leto's place as host. He and Jessica both catch keywords that mean the problem is security, not violence. As Butte and the banker continue feuding, Paul makes a memory of a drowned man on Caladan into a parable of what is happening at the dining room table. Idaho, Halleck, and Jessica go alert, but Tuke breaks the tension with laughter and a toast. Jessica wonders why people so naturally follow Kynes. Paul resents the interference. Jessica asks about where spice is found. Kynes talks about legends of the southern regions, again underplaying his beliefs. A servant delivers a note, and Jessica announces recovery of the carryall. Dessert follows and chat resumes while Jessica ponders the coded portion of Leto's message. They have intercepted a shipment of Harkonnen lasguns, capable of cutting any known substance and exploding if they strike a shield with a force greater than atomics. Jessica disapproves of Paul's boasting, particularly since they will sleep underground as protection against lasguns. Book 1, PGs, 143-183. Jessica springs from her bed at 2 hearing a loud disturbance, straps on her crysknife, pulls on robe and slippers, and moves to the great hall. There, she finds guards restraining a drunken Idaho, who has escorted one of the dinner guests home. Jessica orders a stimulant. An exhausted UA arrives and is forcing caffeine on Idaho when Jessica slaps Idaho's face and throws the contents of the cup in his face. Idaho declares he is taking no orders from a Harkonnen spy, and both you and Jessica stiffen. Yeah, admits, knowing that she has been watched, and Jessica demands that Hawat be brought to her immediately. He must be the traitor. In her room, Jessica sizes up everything for use in emergency. Sooner than she expects, Hawat appears under the influence of drugs. Jessica orders him to sit facing her and warns him not to play coy. He is insulted when she asks if he is a Harkonnen agent, and she knows instantly that he is not. She declines to tell him of her pregnancy, knowing it will complicate Hawat's life and divert him from vital duties. Only Yi cannot be dismissed as a possible traitor, but he has undergone imperial conditioning and hates the Harkonnens for killing his wife. Jessica demands to know why she is a suspect, why Idaho and others get so drunk, and how a threat nearly gets to her son. Jessica suggests how easily she could implicate him, suggests they reorganize their lives so no vulnerable chinks remain, and asks if he refuses to use her Bene Gesserit talents because he fears a rival. Hawat does not trust her motives or the way the sisters manipulate males. Jessica rages at him, saying what they learn is far more powerful than he suspects. If she wished to destroy the Duke or anyone else, Hawat could not stop her. Seeing Hawat's hidden poison darts, Jessica hopes violence is unnecessary, then presses on to ask what the Harkonnens would most want to destroy and most easily accomplish. Their easiest target, she says, is Hawat. Using voice to hold him in his chair, Jessica shows him the fist within the Bene Gesserit glove, which few see and survive. Power is a two-edged sword. She cannot wield it against the Duke's enemies without making him a weakling. The sisterhood exists only to serve. She asks if her refraining from killing him when she could have counts for nothing, and dismisses him. Hawat recalls the old Duke's death in the bullring and refrains from using his darts. Jessica is sure they will now get results. Leto stands tired in the foyer before dawn. An unsigned note warns of a column of smoke by day and a pillar of fire by night. On top of military problems, Leto worries about Hawat's meeting with Jessica. It is time to come clean with her. He should never have used her in the first place. Hearing a strange noise in the dim passageway, Leto arms himself with a knife but does not activate his shield. He finds Tuek recently killed. The noise grows louder and Leto advances on it. He finds Mapes clinging to life and warning of danger to Jessica. A sixth sense warns him to activate his shield, but a dart strikes too fast and paralysis soon spreads. Approaches and tells him he can speak but not move. He apologizes and declares he wants to kill the Baron, not Leto. To do so, he must implant a hollow tooth in Leto's jaw filled with poison gas. Leto is dead anyway, according to the Baron's plan, but can take the Baron with him. The Baron will not be able to resist leaning over him to gloat. At that moment, Leto must bite down. In return for being his weapon, Ye promises to save Jessica and Paul by making them appear to be dead and secreting them to violent enemies of the Harkonnens. Yu implants the tooth and removes the ducal signet ring for Paul. He reminds Leto of the tooth. Jessica awakens bound and gagged and remembers being drugged. She forces herself to be calm, realizes there are 4 captors. The Baron tells her not to pretend to be asleep. He knows how long the drug lasts, which means Yu is in on the plot. She must remain gagged because of the voice. The Mentat de Vries is with the Baron, expecting to collect Jessica as his prize, but is offered a choice between her and exile from the Imperium or the Duchy of Atreides on Arrakis. De Vries takes the Duchy. 2 guards are assigned to take care of her, so the Baron can face a truthsayer safely. They will fly the victims into the desert for worms to devour. They lift Jessica onto a litter beside Paul, who is bound but not gagged. Paul has been calming himself and listening to the captors. Jessica prays that he will not try voice, as he is not ready, and the deaf guard is immune. Paul knows despite his training, has knocked him out and betrayed them. Deaf Kinet and Seago load them aboard a thopter and climb aboard with Kynet flying. They regret wasting a chance to have sex with someone as highborn or pretty as Jessica. They laugh when her cub defends her. Jessica worries that he is pitching voice too high. She knows the guards will be killed to remove all witnesses. As they cross the shield wall and dip over the dunes, Paul begins calm breathing exercises. As Jigo reaches for Jessica's skirt, Paul commands him to remove her gag. Instantly, he obeys. Using voice, Jessica makes them begin fighting over her. Kynet dies first, but voice prevents Zigo from turning the knife on Paul. More voice and Paul's bonds are cut free, and he lashes out with his foot as he is trained. Zygo's heart is crushed. Paul finds the knife, frees his mother, and retrieves a bundle left beneath the pilot's seat. Jessica sees a second Harkonnen thopter, and they begin to run. Sardaukar troops walk through House Atreides bearing lasguns. One identifies acknowledges he has dropped the shields to let them in, and claims the unconscious Duke. The Sardaukar takes the Red Hawk insignia as a souvenir and wants the ducal ring. Ye lies about being sent with a runner to authenticate a message. Jessica and Paul are scheduled to wake up in 10 minutes, but Leto will be out for hours and delivered to the Baron Trust like a roast. Fearing himself called traitor, Ye knows his fate in history. Guards recognize him as he rushes to the Thutopter. He inserts the ducal ring in the standard Frim kit and leaves a cryptic note. He worries about Idaho following his instructions precisely. The Baron watches as explosive artillery pounds the caves in the distant shield wall where Atreides' men are making their last-ditch stand. Sealed in, they will starve to death. De Vries approaches with Kudu, captain of the Baron's personal guard, and announces the Sardaukar have brought in the Duke. The way the Baron talks, knows that Wana is dead. His conditioning had been overpowered by hearing Wana being tortured. De Vries stabs you in the back, reuniting him with his wife. Yue's dying words put the Baron on guard. Leto is lead in, bound, tattered, and dirty. His glazed eyes look insane. De Vries reports the guards have been found dead. Only Kind survives and is being hunted. No mention is made of Jessica, Paul, Hawa, Halleck, or Alec, Halleck, or Idaho. So Leto has hope. The Baron wishes you were alive to answer questions about the ring. Leto remembers the bargain and the tooth. He sees the Baron's shape floating fuzzily around and waits for him to get closer. When Leto comes to again, the Baron is closer and clearer. He wants to know where Paul and Jessica could be. He will torture Leto if necessary to find out. Leto remembers you and the tooth. Leto thinks of Kaladin and Paul, draws in a deep breath, bites down, and blows. Having seen an unusual rippling in the Duke's jaw muscles and heard De Vries' death gasp, the Baron has launched himself backwards on suspensors through a boltothel to safety. Guard Corporal Ayakin Nafud appears to report the corridor is clear and the poison being ventilated. The room is being cleaned. Having lost his last captain of the guard, the Baron promotes Nefud and puts him in charge of the investigation. A Sardaukar Colonel Bashar marches up and insolently hovers. His men delivered the Atreides, and they intend to know his fate. The Emperor does not want his cousin to suffer any agony. The Baron reports that Leto has committed suicide and cannot block the Bashars inspecting the death room. The Emperor will be displeased by the Baron's slip-up. The Baron decides to put Robin in charge of Arrakis and destroy it to the point that Faye, Ratha, will be welcome. He also must order a new mentat from the Tleelalax and eat. He goes to his quarters to await a drugged male slave who looks much like young Paul Atreides. Book 1, PGs, 183, 196. Paul and Jessica sit huddled in a still tent wearing Fremen clothing collected from the first Topter, and they are flown to an isolated spot by Idaho in the second. Awaiting his return, Jessica understands Yua's predicament, and Paul cannot mourn his father. He wonders about the future. If Idaho fails to get through to Kine, while Jessica is certain the key figures will regather. Paul's first concern is to safeguard the family atomics, and he is not prepared, like Jessica, to escape into renegade anonymity. The Sardaukar cannot risk exposing the Emperor's part by staying too long. Jessica weeps for her Duke and thinks of the daughter in her womb. A small receiver shows the Harkonnens winning. If Idaho has not returned by the next nightfall, they must assume he is captured and being tortured and strike out on their own. Paul recalls Leto talking about desert power as the basis for ruling Arrakis and knows the Harkonnens do not practice it and cannot win. Paul realizes that the Fremen are using spice to pay off the guild not to control Arrakis' weather. He feels like a freak and admires the sophisticated Fremen culture. Paul tells Jessica how his father never doubts her, always cherishes her, and regrets failing to make her his duchess. She brushes away tears and regrets the waste of water. Paul feels flawed and empty, listening to her sobs. As she quotes scripture, he focuses on prescient awareness. His mind climbs in awareness, but he realizes his tenuous hold and need to probe, test, and taste over time. A spectrum of possibilities stretches from the remote past to the remote past to the remote future. He sees his own death in countless ways, along with many planets and cultures. He sees swarm of people, including guildsmen and many available paths. Paul fills the empty spot within with data. He understands how he has gotten here, but is unbearably empty. The future is terrifying. He tells himself he is not a monster or freak. When Jessica asks what is wrong, Paul demands to know what she has done to him. She hears no sign of childhood in his voice as he demands her intentions in training him and condemns her wanting a male Ben Gesserit without reference to his father. He tells her of his waking dream caused by exposure to the geriatric spice. Melange changes everyone who takes it, but her genetics enable him to alter consciousness and see they are trapped here forever if the Harkonnens do not kill them. Jessica will bear a daughter, and they will live among the Fremen, thanks to the bolt hole prepared by the Missionaria Protectiva. Paul has a sense of the future, but no control over it. Nothing has prepared him for when the veils of time are ripped away. Jessica lights a glow-tob and studies Paul's face, which looks starved or gravely injured. He has a terrible awareness and knowledge of his own mortality. When Jessica considers a way to escape the Harkonnens, Paul reveals they have Harkonnen blood, for she is the Baron's daughter, sired on one of the Bene Gesserit's sisters. Jessica understands the sisters' plan to fix the ancient feud. Paul declares he has arrived before his time and as something unexpected. The sisters will not learn about him until it is too late. They will go to the Fremen, develop blue eyes and nose calluses, and his sister will be Saint Alia of the Ninth. Paul feels like a seed having a terrible purpose. The future branches to either a horrible confrontation with the Baron, his grandfather, or to a way of violence by holy warriors, drunk on spice liquor and pillaging the universe under Atreides' colors. That is the way the sisterhood wants to go. Paul realizes he hates no one because the human race is one and needs to renew itself, cross, fertilizing and creating new gene pools in the most traditional way. Jessica asks again if the Fremen will give them sanctuary. They will, Paul says, adding they will call him Muad'Dib, the one who points the way. Finally, Paul is able to mourn his father.